Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to have you once again, and I'm delighted that we are together yet another time. My name is Moffat Mshauri. I am a marriage and family therapist and also a counselor psychologist. Now, I want to take this moment to also invite you to my YouTube channel, Moffat Mshauri. I am sure you are going to benefit from very rich content therein. And as you watch, kindly remember to subscribe and also share so that others can as well benefit from that very rich information. Now, today I want us to talk about a very interesting subject that has actually excited me, which I have entitled Seasons of Marriage. Did you know that marriage goes through seasons? When you hear the word season, what comes to your mind? For me, what comes to my mind is that seasons are not permanent, that seasons come and go. And therefore, when we are in a season, we need not to feel or to behave or to react as if the season is going to be there permanently. Marriages go through seasons. Now, I want us to, at the back of our minds, to think about the normal seasons that we have in this life. And to be specific, I want us to think about the seasons that are normally experienced in some parts of the world, like in America and other European nations. And what are these seasons? We have got spring, we have got winter, we have got summer, and we also have fall. When I talk about seasons of marriage, I will want us to use those terms. That when we talk about spring in marriage, what normally happens within that season? When we talk about, winter, what normally happens in that season? When we talk about summer, when we talk about fall, what are we talking about in the context of marriage? Today, I only want us to handle one season that I am calling spring in marriage. What normally happens during spring, as we are going to see, is that a lot of things are going to be experienced. But before I go deeper into spring, I want to say that marriage is not simply a relationship. It is not just a relationship. Marriage is an intimate relationship that encompasses all aspects of life. Intellectual aspects, emotional aspects, social aspects, spiritual aspects, and also physical aspects. This is very, very interesting. Now, if we are saying that seasons are temporal, when we think about the seasons that we go through in our marriage relationships, what are we supposed to do in order to adapt to the changing seasons? Because we have said that seasons do change. What are we supposed to do? Now, the number one thing that we need to do in order to adapt with the changing seasons is that attitudes need to shift. Shift of attitudes. We also need to realize that emotions do fluctuate. Now, the way spouses treat each other ebbs and flows between loving and not so loving. We are in between there. Now, the manner in which couples process these changes will determine the quality of their marriage. The manner in which we adapt to these changes will determine the quality that we are going to experience in that marriage. Now, the changes we face in life and the way we process and respond to them create the seasons of marriage in the face of inevitable changes. This is profound. That the changes we face in our marriage relationships, they create seasons of marriage in the face of inevitable changes. Now, we inevitably have seasons of summer, season of fall, season of winter, as well as, though not necessarily in that predictable order. It's not a must that they go through that order. There are times you can be in summer, another moment somebody else is in winter, and the other moment you are in fall. So they do not follow a chronological order. Now, seasons of marriage are not chronological, as I have said, and thus, springtime is not exclusively for newlyweds. We cannot say that because we are starting to talk about spring, that this is, what happens to all of us. Now, the interweaving of our emotions, attitudes, and also actions create the quality of our relationship in the various seasons of marriage. Now, emotions moderated by reason, guided by truth, equals constructive action. I want to repeat that emotions moderated by reasons, guided by truth, equals constructive action. That therefore we are talking about, being, it is okay to have emotions. But if we have emotions, can we have emotions that are being moderated by reason? Meaning that you don't throw reason out of the window and you expect that things are going to be okay. Yes, there is going to be those emotions, and we talk about emotions, we are talking about both positive and also negative. But then the most important thing is that we need to moderate those emotions with truth. And by so doing, we are going to experience constructive action. In other words, we are going to find the best way to deal with our experiences. Now, like I have said, in today's segment, I only want us to discuss spring as a season in marriage. We are going to have this 4 series. Now, spring is the time for new beginnings. In normal circumstances, it is where you begin to see it is as if life is springing. It is where most marriages begin. There is the excitement of creating a new life together. Like when the two people come together in marriage, they are excited. And this gives men and women the courage to make a covenant, marriage commitment. This is the time when they will come and say words like to love and to cherish, in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, so long as we both shall live. This statement has the ring of spring. Ideally, during the spring is when plants are coming up, and even flowers and all that. But when it comes to marriage, we are talking about like when people come together in marriage and they go down the aisle and they exchange their vows, in health and in sickness, those deep words that we normally say. Now, what are emotions of spring? What are the emotions of this season of spring? And I want to say that it is characterized by animated and buoyant feelings such as excitement, joy, hope, and also happiness. This is spring for you. That people feel excited, people feel happy because they are starting life together. They are starting to blossom. And these are the emotions of spring. Now, let's for a moment look at the attitudes of spring. What are the attitudes of spring? Remember, we said that a season is not permanent. All what we need to have is the shift of our attitudes. Therefore, the attitudes of spring, as we are going to see, is that spouses have positive attitudes. They are happy, they are excited, positive attitudes toward each other. and toward life in general, positive attitudes. Now, the typical attitude of spring are gratitude, and anticipation of the future. Gratitude and anticipation of the future. People are able to say thank you. They are able to appreciate each other. They are full of gratitude in this season of marriage. Couples have an optimistic attitude about their marriages. Very optimistic. They are able to look ahead and see this is where we want to go. This is what we want to do. This is the kind of house we want to put up. This is the kind of life we want our children to have. These are the attitudes of this spring season. The other attitude is that even in the springtime, there can be difficulties. But the prevailing attitude is one of anticipated growth rather than despair. So another attitude is growth and, instead of despair. And even if they are going to experience some, hiccups, some turbulences, some bumps during the season of spring, the attitudes that they have cannot allow them to focus on the challenges. In other words, they focus on growth rather than despair. They focus on growth rather than despair. Now, the attitude of love blossoms beautifully in the spring. They are able to explore each other. They are able to experience love all the way. You consciously think about things you might do or say to express your love to your mate. You can only think about if they are at work. You are thinking about texting them and to tell them how you love them. You are only focused on how much you are able to call out the good from each other during the season of spring. It is also undergirded by the attitude of trust. Very interesting. This season of spring, it is undergirded by the attitude of trust, that you trust each other so much, and this is the reason why if your trust is betrayed during this season, it actually becomes very hard for you to trust, or it takes time for you to trust again. Now, in every season, there are some actions. When you think about the normal, natural season of spring as we know it, what are the actions during that time? During spring, what are the actions? When we talk about the actions of spring within marriage, we are saying that the guiding principle is nurture, which means to feed. You are feeding each other. You are taking time to invest or to deposit into your emotional bank. You are taking time to call out the good in the other person. Therefore, the actions of spring is nurturing or to feed. But I still want you to remember, we said that seasons are temporal. They are not permanent, meaning that you will not always be experiencing even these actions. This is nurturing. During spring is when you go and take care of your plants and all that. It's about nurturing, which means to feed. Couples are busy investing in their emotional bank. Now, the actions of springtime are designed to feed and to nourish the relationship. Feeding and nourishing the relationship. These are the actions of spring. Both spouses seek to do things that will enhance the life of their mate. They do things that will enhance the life of their mate. They ask themselves questions like, how will this affect our relationship? How will this affect our relationship? If they're having a crisis, how is it going to affect our relationship? Both spouses will do things to deepen the relationship and to benefit the other person. This is the time when they actually, this is the time when the essence of marriage begin to make a lot of sense in the lives of this couple. This is the time when they get to understand that the whole essence of marriage is to make the other person become a better version of themselves. And they strive towards that. They nurture that relationship. That is another action of spring. But I also want to say, as I have said before, that even though this is springtime, and we have talked about the actions of spring and the attitude of spring, it does not mean that there is no downside of spring. And what are the downsides of spring? Number one, we are saying that we encounter irritations. You can get irritated that pop up unannounced and unexpected. Because remember, during this time, you are beginning now to know one another, and the rubber has hit the road. And you're beginning now to identify some things that you don't like about your spouse, but because of the season that you are in, the attitudes that you have set, maybe you can get irritated, but you are not going extreme to a point of jeopardizing your relationship. Now, these irritations, however, can cause marital itching, even in the midst of springtime. It can cause marital itching. They can ruin a perfectly wonderful vacation or turn a fine dinner into an emotional fiasco. This is so true. Maybe somebody says something and you remember, maybe it triggers some pain and you get irritated. And I have heard many couples say that they actually went separate ways during their time in honeymoon, and they come back to the city and they are not talking to one another. It can cause some itching here and there. Now, these irritations do not change the season, but may make spring less enjoyable. It may not change the season, but it may make spring less enjoyable. Say, for instance, maybe you had traveled to the coast or wherever else that you had gone for your honeymoon, and something happens and you feel irritated, and you are not able to enjoy the swimming. You go back to bed, or you even drive back to the city, and you spoil that particular moment that you had, which I call the miracle moment. Very, very important. These irritations can be turned into assets as couples maximize their differences. Did you know that marriage can be so boring if the two of you are the same? Now, it therefore goes without saying that we need to maximize on our differences. And during the spring season, this is a season where couples are being called upon to maximize on their differences. Because there is normally a tendency of couples wanting the other spouse to be like them, to behave like them, and we begin to want other people to cease to exist. There's that tendency, though it is very subconscious, and you want them to be like you. And this is where the itching and the conflict and the irritation, can arise from. But what we are being told during this season, we can choose to maximize on our differences. We maximize on our differences. Because the moment we maximize on our differences, we begin to broaden our horizon. We begin to look beyond our challenges. We begin to understand that this is just a temporal season. But the fact that there are some irritations, the fact that there are some things that you don't like, does not allow you or should not make you jeopardize your relationship. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, you can choose to call out the good, from your spouse. You can choose to maximize on your differences, because you will realize that your differences are actually what is going to spice up that relationship. Thank you very much, and I look forward to having you benefit and listen to me as I take you through the second season, the season of winter. Thank you, and see you there.